first thing Era noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, no. This silence pressed down on the chest, heavy and deliberate, as if the room itself had been trained to hold its breath. The restaurant was expensive enough that even the air smelled polished. Crystal chandeliers hung low, casting warm light over white linen tables. Soft classical music played, but it felt rehearsed, like a lie meant to calm nerves. Era balanced a tray of wine glasses against her palm, her shoulders already aching from a double shift. She had learned to move quietly in places like this. Rich people didn't like to be reminded that workers existed. Her eyes dropped instinctively when she approached table 7. Everyone knew that table, not because of the reservation name, but because of the man sitting there, Kang Jun-suk. Era didn't know his face from newspapers or TV. Men like him didn't live where cameras could reach. But she had heard whispers from the kitchen staff, the way people lowered their voices without realizing it. Gang boss, Mafia king, the kind of man you never look at twice. He sat perfectly still, his posture relaxed but alert, like a predator that didn't need to rush. His suit was dark, tailored to precision. No flashy jewelry, no wasted movement. Across from him sat his fiancée. She was beautiful in a way that felt intentional. Carefully chosen dress, diamond earrings that caught the light when she laughed. Too loudly, too often, Era poured the wine. Her hand didn't shake. Years of practice had taught her how to hide fear behind routine. Then she heard it, a whisper, sharp enough to cut through the music. They're already in position. Era's fingers stilled mid-pour. Her breath caught. The words weren't meant for her. They came from the fiancé, spoken low, fast, directed at someone on the phone beneath the table. Era's eyes flicked up instinctively, catching her reflection in the polished silverware. She saw things she hadn't noticed before. The man near the bar wearing a server's jacket she didn't recognize. Another by the exit, touching his ear like he was adjusting an earpiece. The way the real staff had been slowly sent home early. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't a dinner. It was a setup. Era's mind raced. She could walk away, pretend she hadn't heard anything, finish her shift, go home alive. That was the smart choice. But then she looked at Kang Jun-suk's reflection. He was listening, not to his fiancée but to the room. Calm, unaware, betrayed. Something twisted painfully in Era's chest. Please like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe now for more real romantic stories. She had been betrayed before, by people who smiled while planning her ruin, by those who thought her life was expendable. Her manager once told her, "People like us don't get heroes." Her hand moved before fear could stop it. She reached for a napkin. Her pen scratched softly, the sound thunderous in her ears. "Your fiancé sold you out. They're already in position." 6 words, a death sentence or a lifeline. As she placed the wine glass down, she folded the napkin carefully and slid it beneath the crystal base. Her fingers brushed the table. That was all. She stepped back, heart hammering, every instinct screaming at her to run. Kang Jun-suk's hand moved. He lifted the glass. The napkin came with it. He unfolded it once. "Read it." Era waited for rage, for a signal, for her world to end. Instead, he smiled, slow, controlled, dangerous. His eyes lifted, meeting hers for the briefest second. And in that moment, Era knew, whatever she had just done, there was no going back. Era's heart slammed so hard she was sure the entire restaurant could hear it. Kang Jun-suk's smile was not warm. It wasn't amused. It was precise, like a blade sliding back into its sheath. He lifted his glass, swirling the wine slowly, as if nothing in the world had changed. As if a stranger hadn't just warned him of his own execution. Across the table, his fiancée laughed again. Too sharp this time. "You're quiet," she said sweetly. "Is something wrong, Jun-suk?" Era held her breath. The man she had just warned didn't look at his fiancée. His gaze drifted lazily around the room instead, taking in exits, angles, shadows. "Nothing," he replied. "Just enjoying the evening." Era stepped backward, every muscle in her body screaming for distance. She forced her feet to move at a normal pace, returning toward the service counter. Please don't react. Please don't look at me again. Then Kang Jun-suk did something strange. He adjusted his ring. Just once. Era didn't know it then, but that small motion sent a silent command rippling through the building. The music skipped. The lights flickered. And then, darkness. A scream tore through the room as the chandeliers cut out completely. Glass shattered somewhere to the left. Someone yelled. Chairs scraped violently against the floor. Era ducked behind the counter instinctively, her tray crashing beside her. Her ears rang as a gunshot cracked through the chaos. Then another. The sound wasn't wild, it was controlled. Professional. She pressed her hands over her head, heart pounding so hard she felt dizzy. Get down! Someone shouted. Footsteps thundered across the marble floor. A body slammed into a table nearby. Wine spilled, soaking into expensive linen like blood. Through a crack beneath the counter, Era saw flashes of movement. Men moving fast, coordinated, nothing like panicked civilians. This wasn't a random attack. This was war. A woman screamed again. No, you said you had control. A familiar voice shrieked. Era's stomach twisted. The fiancé. Era risked lifting her head just enough to see. The woman was standing now, her elegance shattered. Her phone lay smashed at her feet. Her face was twisted with panic, eyes wild. You promised me, she yelled at someone in the dark. A man grabbed her arm roughly, pulling her toward the exit. That was when Kang Jun-suk appeared from the shadows. He moved like he belonged there, calm, lethal, untouched by fear. His voice cut through the noise, low and deadly. Let her go. The man hesitated. It was his last mistake. The scuffle ended quickly, too quickly. When it was over, the fiancée collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Not because she was scared, but because she had failed. Kang Jun-suk looked down at her, cold. So this was the plan, he said quietly. Police sirens wailed in the distance. His men were already clearing paths, ushering guests out, controlling the scene like puppeteers pulling strings. Era stayed frozen behind the counter, her body shaking uncontrollably. I should have run. I should have left. A shadow fell across the counter. She looked up slowly. Kang Jun-suk stood there, close enough now that she could see the fine scar along his jaw, the sharp intelligence in his eyes, the absence of mercy or gratitude. He studied her like a puzzle. You, he said. Her throat closed. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. You knew, he interrupted. She nodded, tears burning her eyes. I heard her. I thought. You thought, he said softly. And I lived. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he extended his hand. Come with me. Her breath hitched. What if I don't? His gaze didn't harden. It softened. That would be dangerous. She stared at his hand. Sirens grew louder. Shouts echoed. Time was running out. Era placed her trembling fingers in his palm. The world she knew vanished the moment he pulled her to her feet. As they disappeared into the back corridor, she realized something terrifying. She had just saved the devil. And now the devil had claimed her. Era's eyes snapped open to darkness. The air smelled of leather, cologne, and a faint metallic tang. Money, power, and something she couldn't name. She was seated in a car. Luxurious, soft leather, tinted windows that blocked the city's glow. Outside, Seoul's skyline pulsed in streaks of neon, but she couldn't see it. Her world had been reduced to the confined space of this car. Her hands fisted in her lap. She should be terrified. She should scream. And she did silently in her mind. What did I just do? The memory of the note, of Kang Jun-suk's unreadable smile, replayed like a nightmare. The gunfire, the chaos, the fiancé's screams. Am I about to die? A shadow fell across her. She turned her head slowly. Kang Jun-suk. He was close, too close. Not menacing, not yet, but still entirely in control. Every movement deliberate. Every inch of him radiated authority. The kind of authority that bends a room, bends people, bends reality itself. He didn't say anything immediately. He just sat across from her, studying her like one would examine a fragile artifact. Curious, patient, precise. "You saved my life," he said quietly. His voice was calm, measured, almost hypnotic. Era's mouth went dry. I didn't do it for you." He tilted his head slightly, faint amusement in his eyes. "Then why?" She swallowed, unsure if honesty would kill her faster than silence. "Because betrayal kills worse than bullets. I couldn't just stand there." For a moment his gaze softened, and she thought absurdly that he might believe her. "Do you understand who I am?" he asked, his tone deceptively casual. Her eyes narrowed. "Enough to know I should be terrified right now." He smiled faintly, not the same dangerous smile from the restaurant, but a subtle curve that carried power. "You should be, but you aren't." Era's chest tightened. "Why am I not panicking?" The car stopped abruptly. She lurched forward slightly before he caught her with one hand. Strong, unyielding, like steel wrapped in silk. Outside, men in suits waited. Not moving, just watching. They were more shadows than people. Guardians of his world, his secrets, his danger. Era's pulse surged. "This is it. I'm dead." Instead, they escorted her into a penthouse that overlooked the entire city. The lights of Seoul shimmered like a river of stars below. She had never been anywhere so expensive in her life. She felt like an insect in a glass terrarium. He gestured to a chair. She hesitated, then sat, trembling. Kang Jun-suk poured 2 glasses of wine. He handed one to her. Era's hands shook, barely able to hold the glass. "You don't have to drink it," he said, watching her carefully. "I know, thank you." He didn't seem offended. Instead, he leaned back against the marble counter, his gaze wandering, calculating. Most people would have screamed, called for help, or fainted by now. You did none of those things. Era's hands tightened around her glass. "I've survived by staying invisible. You don't get to be noticed if you want to live." He studied her for a long time. Then, faintly, a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Yet here you are very visible." The weight of his words pressed down on her. A part of her wanted to run. Another part couldn't look away. Finally, he spoke softly, almost to himself. "I wonder why you risked your life for a stranger." Era met his eyes. "Because no one deserves to be betrayed like that." The words hung in the air. For the first time, Kang Jun-suk looked human. Not the cold, untouchable man she'd seen in the restaurant. Human and intrigued and quietly fascinated. Her mind screamed to leave, to escape, to survive. But in that moment, a strange, dangerous connection formed. He was the predator. She was the prey. Era is terrified, trapped, and doesn't know if she'll be killed, or if this man she just saved will become the most important figure in her life. Era could barely breathe. She had never been inside a place like this. The penthouse was vast, luxurious beyond imagination. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the entire room, revealing the glittering lights of Seoul like a river of stars. Crystal chandeliers hung above, sparkling with the kind of perfection money could buy. But it wasn't the beauty that struck her. It was the emptiness behind it. Every piece of furniture, every object, felt deliberate. Nothing was personal. Nothing was chaotic. It was a world designed for control, power, and order. And in the middle of it stood Kang Jun-suk. He didn't need to speak to dominate the space. Every step, every movement seemed to belong to the building itself. Yet when he finally spoke, his voice was calm, soft, almost intimate. "You must be tired," he said. "You've been through a lot tonight." Era swallowed. Her hands clenched in her lap. I'm fine." "You're lying," he said, his tone almost teasing. "But I won't force you to admit it. Not yet." Her eyes narrowed. She wanted to run. She wanted to hide. But she couldn't. Something about him made hiding feel pointless. "You're..." she began, hesitating. "Dangerous." He smiled faintly, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "I've been called that before." The air shifted. Era realized that even though she was afraid, she was also fascinated. The stories she had heard about him, the Mafia king, untouchable, ruthless, suddenly had a face, and that face was looking at her, studying her, measuring her worth. He walked toward a wall of shelves filled with books, weapons, and objects she couldn't name. Each item seemed to represent a story, a power, a history she wasn't supposed to understand. "I suppose you want to know who I am," he said casually, as if reading her thoughts. Era's heart pounded. "Yes, I think I do." He chuckled softly. "I'm just a businessman," he said, but the lie was obvious. The way his men had moved tonight, the way the chaos bent around him, the lethal precision of his control, all spoke louder than any words. Era's mind raced. If he's just a businessman, then why does the world itself seem afraid of him? Why do I feel like I'm standing inside a storm, and he is the eye? She wanted to ask more questions, but fear clamped her tongue. Instead, she watched him, noting the scars along his jawline, the slight tension in his shoulders, the faint tension in his hands that hinted at strength controlled by years of discipline. "You're not what I expected," Era said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "And what did you expect?" he asked, leaning against the counter. "Someone unfeeling, cruel, dead inside." He looked at her for a long moment, eyes unreadable. Then he smiled, a small, almost imperceptible curve. "I'm human," he said quietly. "Most people just don't get to see it." Era's heart skipped. Human? He's human? The thought was dizzying. She had never considered that someone capable of what he did, someone so powerful, feared, untouchable, could also be human. Her pulse quickened, but not from fear alone. There was something else, something dangerous in its sweetness. "You saved my life tonight," he said, shifting slightly closer. "And I should be thanking you, but I won't. Not yet." "Why not?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Because I want to understand you first," he replied. "I want to know why you risked your life for someone you barely knew. That tells me more about you than I need to know about anyone else." Era felt a shiver run through her. She wanted to retreat, to run, to escape this dangerous, intoxicating man. But every instinct she had screamed at her. You are already inside his world. There is no leaving. For the first time, fear and fascination collided in her chest, creating a storm that left her trembling, dizzy, and unwilling to look away. Then he poured 2 glasses of wine, offering one to her. Era hesitated, shaking her head. "Good," he said softly. "You're smart." She didn't understand why she felt relieved at his praise, or why her heart beat faster when he looked at her like that, calm, unreadable, yet intensely aware of her every thought. Era didn't know it then, but something had shifted between them. The predator and the prey weren't clear anymore, and the dangerous game had only just begun. Era glimpses the human side of Junsuk, but she's still trapped in his world. Questions swirl. Who is he really? Why is he letting her live? And what will happen when his enemies discover she exists? Era had thought the danger was behind her. The restaurant incident, the ambush, Kang Junsuk. She had survived. She had returned to her life of grinding, invisible hours, and small victories. But peace, she quickly realized, was an illusion. It began innocently enough. A shadow in the cafe doorway. A tall figure, coat collar up, hands in his pockets. Watching, waiting. At first, she thought she was imagining it. He didn't move, didn't enter, just lingered. The chime above the door announced his presence, but no one else seemed to notice him. Not a customer, not the barista next door, not the elderly man reading the newspaper in the corner. And then, slowly, recognition hit. Kang Junsuk. Her stomach plummeted. Why is he here? He walked in casually, like a man who had a right to the place, like he owned the air itself. The other patrons didn't see him as dangerous. He was just present. But Era's eyes burned. She remembered the chaos, the gunfire, the night that had almost ended her life. And yet, something in the way he moved was different. Relaxed, almost ordinary. He approached the counter. "Coffee," he said simply. "Black." Era froze. Hands trembling, she prepared the cup. The motion felt mechanical, as if she were trapped in a loop of her own fear. "You didn't need to come back," she said, her voice low. He raised an eyebrow, that half-smile curling at the corner of his mouth. "Didn't I?" Her chest tightened. "Why is he doing this?" He slid into a chair at a corner table, distant enough to be polite, close enough to be unnerving. He observed the cafe, the staff, her movements, like a predator noting patterns, calculating risks. She wanted to ignore him, to act normal, to make him disappear from her life. But she couldn't. Something about him pulled at her attention. An invisible string she couldn't sever. The next day, he appeared again. And again. Era tried to rationalize it. Perhaps it was coincidence. Perhaps he just liked coffee. But coincidences didn't follow her in a precise, calculated pattern. Each visit was a silent test. He said nothing, yet his presence spoke volumes. He watched how she moved, how she interacted with customers, how she handled pressure. And Era, though terrified, though still cautious, found herself reacting in ways she didn't expect. Her heart raced when he was near, her palms sweated, and sometimes she caught herself glancing at him when she thought no one was looking. She hated the effect he had on her. She resented it. And yet, a part of her, small, dangerous, curious, wanted to see more. One afternoon, he finally spoke. "You're braver than you look," he said quietly, his gaze fixed on her from across the room. Era froze. "I'm not." "You are," he interrupted. "Most people would have left the city, changed their lives, or disappeared entirely after that night. You didn't." Her stomach tightened. "Why is he praising me? Why does it feel dangerous?" She didn't answer. Words felt useless. He smiled faintly, leaning back. "I like that about you." The words sank into her chest like ice. And somewhere deep down, she realized the truth. She was already entangled in his world. Not just because of the night he had survived. Not just because of the note she had written. But because of him, the boss who kept coming back. Era's life is no longer her own. Jun-suk's quiet appearances blur the line between danger, obsession, and attraction. Questions loom. Why is he following her? Does he trust her? Or is this another test? And when will his enemies notice she exists? Era's life had been ordinary once. Wake up, work, survive, repeat. Now, even breathing felt dangerous. Every shadow seemed to watch. Every stranger's glance carried a hidden question. It started the afternoon she closed the cafe. She was stacking chairs when a hand clamped over her mouth from behind. A man's rough grip dragged her into a dark alley. She fought, screamed, kicked, but her assailant was stronger than anyone she had ever faced. Fear gripped her chest like a vice. "You know who he is, don't you?" A voice hissed in her ear. Era froze. The words didn't need context. She didn't want context. "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied, though her heart pounded in panic. The man chuckled, low and cruel. "Don't lie. You saved him. You saw everything that night. You know exactly who he is. And now, you're part of this." Era's stomach turned. Part of what? Before she could react, the grip lifted, and another shadow moved in front of her. Another figure, familiar, impossibly calm. "Kong Jun-suk," Era whispered. He didn't rush forward. He didn't raise his hand. He simply walked, slow and deliberate, like he owned every inch of the alley. The city's neon lights reflected off his dark eyes, making them shine with something cold and dangerous. "I warned you," he said quietly to the man who had grabbed her. "Stay away." The man laughed, a harsh sound that carried the threat of bullets and broken bones. "And if I don't?" Kong Jun-suk's hand moved once, and the man crumpled silently, swiftly, leaving Era trembling. Her knees weakened, and she sank to the ground. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly, bending down to help her up. Era's hands shook as she took his. I didn't." "You didn't what?" he asked gently. "Die? Survive? Save me?" She swallowed, trembling. "I didn't mean to get involved. I didn't want this life. His gaze softened for the briefest second, a crack in the armor. No one asks to be part of my life, but you chose. And now, there's no turning back. Era's eyes widened. I'm not a fighter. I'm just a girl who serves coffee. And yet, he said, helping her to her feet, you risked your life. You didn't run. You didn't freeze. You acted. The words settled on her chest like a weight. She realized then the truth she had been avoiding. Her life belonged to him now in ways she couldn't untangle. And somewhere deep inside, despite her fear, she felt a flicker of something dangerous, something magnetic. Because even as she hated being pulled into his world, part of her wanted it. She wanted to understand him, to survive with him, to be near him. Why are you here? She asked finally, her voice trembling. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied her, intense and unreadable. Because you exist, he said at last. And that makes you valuable. To me. Era's breath hitched. The word valuable hung in the air like a warning. Because she realized the harshest truth. In Kang Jun-suk's world, everything and everyone valuable was dangerous. And now she was both. Era is no longer safe. The enemies have found her. Kang Jun-suk's quiet admiration for her masks a dangerous truth. She is a pawn and a key in a deadly game. The stakes are higher than ever. The night air smelled of smoke and neon lights. Era didn't have time to think. She barely had time to breathe. She had been grabbed, blindfolded, dragged into a car, and tossed into a place that smelled like concrete and fear. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like it could shatter her ribs. She didn't know where she was. She didn't know who had taken her. Only one thing was clear. It wasn't random. Her mind raced. They know about me. They know about him. I'm a bargaining chip. A pawn. Minutes or hours passed. The blindfold was removed. Era's eyes adjusted to dim light. Her captors were shadows in the corners. Faces partially obscured. Voices rough. Threatening. Tell us where he is, one demanded. The boss, or you die. Era's throat went dry. She had no answers. And even if she did, giving them would mean death, not just for her, but for someone she barely understood she cared about. Then the door burst open. Movement like liquid steel. Silence in chaos. And suddenly, Kang Jun-suk stood in the center of the room. He didn't shout. He didn't hesitate. He simply appeared. Let her go, he said, quiet and calm, as if the world would obey him, and it did. The men froze. One of them lunged. He barely moved. Just a subtle flick of his wrist, and the man collapsed silently, utterly defeated. Era watched wide-eyed. The calm, unreadable man who had fascinated her, scared her, intrigued her. He was terrifying. Jun-suk, she whispered, relief and fear colliding in her chest. He didn't answer immediately. His eyes swept the room, cold and lethal. Every threat eliminated before it could breathe. When the danger was gone, he turned to her. His expression softened. Not completely human, but enough for her to feel it. You're safe, he said. For now. Era's legs buckled. He caught her instinctively. She was trembling violently. A storm of fear and adrenaline. You could have died, he said quietly. Do you understand that? She began, voice cracking, but the words failed her. He lowered her to her feet. His hand lingered, brushing hers, almost brushing, not quite, yet leaving a trace of warmth and danger in its wake. You're not just a girl who serves coffee, he said. You're part of my world now. And in my world, the people I care about, they are never safe. Her chest tightened at the admission. Part of her wanted to run. Part of her wanted to throw herself into the storm of him. And she realized, with a shiver that wasn't entirely fear. She cared. Why do you care? She asked, barely above a whisper. He paused, then met her gaze, intense, almost painfully so. Because I can't afford not to. The words hit her harder than any threat. They were a promise, a warning, and a confession all at once. For the first time, Era understood the dangerous truth. Kang Jun-suk's greatest weakness wasn't his enemies. It was her. And now she had become his strength and his vulnerability. The enemy was still out there. And now they had a target they hadn't had before. Her life, once ordinary, was no longer hers. It belonged in some impossible way to him. And in that realization, Era's heart both broke and raced. Era has been taken as leverage. Jun-suk has saved her, but the danger isn't gone. Their lives are now entwined, and the stakes are higher than ever. Will he destroy everything to protect her? And will she accept being part of a world she once only watched from afar? The city was silent in the kind of way that only came before chaos. Kang Jun-suk stood at the edge of his office floor. The Seoul skyline stretched like a river of lights below. He had made his decision. Tonight, everything would change. Era sat across from him, wrapped in a blanket, still trembling. Her eyes were wide, heart racing, but something in her gaze had shifted. Fear now shared space with something else, trust, fragile but real. "You don't have to watch this," he said quietly. She shook her head. "I want to. I need to know." He studied her for a long moment, the faintest shadow of a smile tugging at his lips. "You shouldn't, but I suppose you're not the type to stay invisible anymore." He rose. Era followed instinctively, even though she knew she should stay. His presence filled the room like gravity. The first call came through his encrypted line. The voice on the other end was calm, but Era could hear the threat beneath every word. "They've found her," the voice said, "and they know you're coming." Jun-suk's jaw tightened. He hung up without a word. Era felt her stomach drop. "They're coming for me?" "Yes," he said quietly, "but they won't win." Within minutes, the penthouse was empty. They moved through the city in silence, Jun-suk driving with precision. Every turn calculated, every shadow scanned. Era clutched her hands together, trying to steady her racing heart. "You could be anywhere," she whispered. "Why do this? Why risk everything for me?" He glanced at her from the rearview mirror. "Because no one who saves me dies." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Authority, danger, and something warmer, something that made her pulse stutter. They arrived at a compound on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place built for war. Concrete walls, watchtowers, security cameras lining every angle. Jun-suk didn't knock. He didn't hesitate. The men waiting outside barely had time to react. Within moments, the fight was over. Efficient, precise, merciless. Era barely had time to register the violence before it was done. Inside, the enemy leader awaited. Calm, arrogant, certain of victory. Jun-suk didn't speak first. He let his presence speak. Every step, every motion was measured. The man's confidence wavered. "You've overstepped," Jun-suk said finally, voice cold as ice. "And now you pay." By the time the enemy realized it, it was too late. Their operations, alliances, and power crumbled in a single night. Era watched, heart pounding, as Jun-suk moved through the chaos with terrifying calm. She had never seen anything like it. The man was lethal, beautiful, unstoppable. And yet, when he looked at her during the fight briefly in passing, there was a softness that made her chest ache. When it was over, the silence was deafening. He turned to her, bloodless but fierce, eyes dark and intense. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "No, I'm alive. Because of you." He walked to her, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "Not just because of me, because you saved yourself. Because you didn't run. Because you existed." Her breath hitched. That look in his eyes, the one that promised danger and desire all at once, made her knees weak. Why me?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. He stepped closer, closer than anyone had ever been, until the world around them seemed to disappear. "Because I've never met anyone like you. And because I can't afford not to care." The words were a promise, a warning, a confession. And in that moment, Era realized the depth of the bond forming between them. A connection forged in chaos, danger, and undeniable attraction. Outside, the city continued, unaware. But inside, two lives had changed forever. Jun-suk had dismantled empires, but in doing so, he had also revealed a vulnerability he had never allowed anyone to see. An era had seen it. They were no longer just boss and waitress. They were partners, survivors, and something more. Something dangerous. Something forbidden. Something that neither could deny. And yet, as Era's hand brushed his, a new question formed in her mind, sharp and urgent. If he could destroy the world for her, could the world destroy her for him? Jun-suk has decimated his enemies to protect Era, and their bond deepens. But the past, the fiancé, and rival factions still loom. Danger isn't over, and every choice now carries life or death stakes. The penthouse was quiet. For the first time in weeks, Era allowed herself to breathe without the constant thrum of danger pressing against her chest. The city outside glittered like a million distant fires, indifferent to the chaos that had raged just hours ago. Kang Jun-suk sat across from her, his usual armor of control softened in the dim light. He poured 2 cups of tea instead of wine, a small gesture she hadn't expected. Era watched him carefully. Even after everything, the ambush, the abductions, the violence, he remained impossibly composed. But she could see the faint tremor of exhaustion in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched briefly before relaxing, the tension he tried to hide from everyone but her. "You didn't have to stay," she said quietly. He looked at her, eyes unreadable. "I know." She hesitated, her hands wrapped around her cup, warmth seeping into her fingers. "Then why did you?" "Because I couldn't," he replied simply. The words were straightforward, but their meaning sank into her like a stone into water. Because she had begun to understand him in ways that scared and fascinated her. Kang Jun-suk didn't operate like other people. He didn't love like other people. And yet, somehow he had chosen her. Era's chest tightened. "Do you ever get tired of this?" she asked. "Of all the chaos? Of being this man?" He took a slow sip of tea, letting the silence stretch. Then, quietly, "I used to think I could live without it, that I could hide from everything. But it doesn't matter how strong you are. There's always something or someone who breaks through." Her heart lurched. She didn't need him to say it. She already knew she was that someone. For a long moment, they simply existed in the quiet together. No violence, no enemies, no fiancé plotting in the shadows. Just them. "You're different," he said finally, almost to himself. "Most people, they'd run from me, or try to take advantage, or freeze. You survived, and you stayed human." Era swallowed, feeling the weight of his words. I'm not sure I should be proud of that," she admitted. "You should," he said softly, "because it means you understand what it means to be alive. And alive is rare in my world." Her gaze met his tentative, searching. "And us?" she asked. "Are we alive?" His lips curved into the faintest smile, just enough to hint at something dangerous, tender, and unspoken. "We are," he said quietly. "But alive isn't safe, and safety is overrated." The room fell silent again, but the weight in the air had shifted. No longer was Era just the waitress who slipped a note. She was the woman who had stood beside him through death, chaos, and betrayal. And for the first time, she realized she didn't want to leave. Not his world, not his side, not him. The city outside continued, indifferent. But inside, in that small, fragile bubble of quiet, something had changed forever. For now, they were free, but the past never sleeps. A faint vibration in Kang Jun-suk's pocket made him stiffen. He glanced down, expression darkening. Era noticed. Her pulse quickened. "Is it them?" He shook his head slowly. "Not yet, but it will be." And just like that, the fragile piece was gone. Era leaned back, letting out a shaky breath. She had tasted safety and realized that it would never last. But she also knew, with an unshakable certainty, that she would face whatever came next with him. Era and Jun-suk share a rare moment of peace and emotional intimacy, but threats linger on the horizon. The past, enemies, and unfinished business remind them that calm is fleeting, and their love will be tested in the days to come. The rain hit Seoul like a storm of shattered glass, streaking down the windows of the penthouse where Kang Jun-suk and Era stood side by side. It had been days since the chaos, the attacks, the betrayals, the ambushes. But the city's pulse never slowed, and neither did theirs. Era's hands were cold, gripping the edge of the balcony railing. Her hair clung to her damp face, her heart still racing from the adrenaline of the previous night. Jun-suk stood close behind her, his coat draping over her shoulders, shielding her from the rain. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to simply exist in his presence, to feel the warmth of someone who had once been untouchable. "You know," he said quietly, voice soft, almost vulnerable. "When I read that note you slipped to me, I realized two things. One, someone out there still has faith in humanity. And two, I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't ignore you." Era swallowed, feeling her chest tighten. The memory of the note, small, fragile, and trembling under her hands, flashed in her mind. "Your fiancé sold you out. They're already in position." She had written it in a moment of fear, a moment of courage, a moment that changed both their lives. "Did I?" she began hesitantly. "Did I save you?" He turned to her fully, their eyes locking in a storm of emotion. "You saved me more than you'll ever know. Not just that night, but since then. Every choice you've made, every act of bravery, it's shaped my world." Tears pricked her eyes. "I was just a waitress. I didn't know anything about your world." "Maybe," he said softly, brushing a wet strand of hair from her face. "But even the smallest action can change everything. That note, it reminded me that trust exists, that someone can choose courage over fear. And now, that someone is you." Era felt a shiver of warmth run through her. The danger, the chaos, the violence, they had all led here. And in that moment, the storm outside didn't matter. She was alive, standing beside the man who had once seemed untouchable. But peace, even now, was fragile. A faint chime echoed from Jun-suk's phone. He glanced at it. His eyes hardened, but he didn't speak. Era felt the tension spike. The world had a way of reminding them that calm never lasted. "I'll handle it," he said, voice low and steady. Then he looked at her, a rare vulnerability breaking through his composed exterior. "Stay with me, no matter what happens next." Era nodded, gripping his hand, her fingers intertwined with his, small, fragile, defiant. She had chosen this life, this danger, this man, and she would face it all with him. Jun-suk stepped closer, forehead resting lightly against hers. The rain soaked them both, the wind whipping around like the city itself was alive. But inside that small bubble, there was only each other. "I promise," he whispered, "nothing will harm you, not if I can stop it." And in that moment, Era knew. The note that had started it all wasn't just a warning. It was a beginning, a choice, a spark that had ignited something neither of them could ignore. A bond forged in chaos, strengthened by danger, and sealed by courage. As the rain continued to pour, they stood together, two hearts beating in unison against the world. Because some love isn't just about passion. It's about survival, trust, sacrifice, and the unshakable certainty that no matter what comes next, you face it together. The story started with a simple note, and it changed everything. Who will rise and who will fall in the next storm? If you loved Era and Jun-suk's story, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to witness their next chapter. Comment below. What would you do if one small act of courage changed your life forever?